welcome to Mystic Detectives. I am one of your hosts, Crystal Miller.
And I'm your other host, Andrea Marziano. Welcome.
Welcome. So, what's new, Andrea?
Well, the newest thing is this is our first episode, and I'm so excited. And I'm looking forward to the introduction we're going to give of ourselves and the founder of our program. And that's the most interesting thing going on for me right now.
So let's kind of jump ahead and let's go ahead and let our founder introduce himself.
All righty then. I'm Topher. How are we doing tonight?
Great.
Hey, Topher. I'm great. Yeah, so glad to have you here to assist us to do our first introductory podcast and let people know kind of some of the things that we'll be looking towards and learning and developing.
Me too. It's gonna be. I'm super excited with the amount of people, where we're going with this and where it's gonna take us.
Agreed. We have some questions that we've written down. We'll try not to make it sound like we're reading them, dear listeners. We do want to make sure that we get as much information out of Topher as we can to really give you some good background into what we're doing here with Mystic Detectives. So apologies in advance if we fail at that, trying to sound like we're not reading. But just wanted to throw that out there. What inspired you to start Mystic Detectives?
What inspired me to start Mystic Detectives? You know, I really been fascinated by the mystical world since I was young, and watching the TV shows, watching the movies, sitting around the campfire, telling some scary stuff and freaking me out when I was a kid, and my family members telling me about our family history that made me go, ooh, maybe there's something going on. And then meeting amazing people and going, holy cow, maybe there is something going on. Let's put some science to this and let's see what's really going on. And it's been driving us down a rabbit hole that I've been like, wow, Alice, I'm right behind you.
I think that's true. A lot of people who start looking into mystic things in any level do start going down the proverbial rabbit hole. And sometimes to me and the people I've spoken to, it shows that they find a level of passion for themselves for something and a skill and maybe a gift that they have. And other people find that they may not believe it. And it's really interesting to me because for me and my perspective of the podcast and also some of the other things we're doing, I'm coming in with a really open mind. I know that I have gifts myself, and to hear and listen to other people with the types of gifts that they have, it's just been a fascinating rabbit hole for me, if we're going to call it that. What about you, Crystal?
I've had a great time so far, frankly. I mean, I've loved the people I've gotten to know. They're new to me, and I've really enjoyed getting to meet them and getting to interact with them and learning about them.
So, Topher, how would you describe the podcast as you see it to someone new? If you were going to walk up and say, hey, we got this great podcast, how would you describe it to people?
Since this is our first podcast, it'd be really hard for me to describe it to anybody.
Okay, but let's take that question and dissect it. How would you describe Mystic Detectives to somebody who knew nothing about them, about us?
So I meet people all the time, all new people, and it's really fascinating to hear their stories because of what I do for a living, and that's kind of where I like get more of an idea of what I wanted to do with Mystic Detectives, because there's so many amazing stories out there of like, how did you get to know your name, or who told you your name, or who or anything like that, and just something simple as that has an amazing story behind it. And when I met a lot of these mystical people, I'm like, wow, how did you learn about it? And a lot of people, when they're 5 years old, this happened to them, and they're like, holy jinkies, that would freak me out. And then for other people, they're like, oh, I picked up a book and I started studying it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool too. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting adventure going that way.
Well, what about this, Toph? What's the mission statement for Mystic Detectives?
Oh, that one took me a little bit of time to figure out, but it's more of a we are here to learn through teaching and listening and observation, because we'll see where the world takes us. But if you're always jumping in front of the train, you're never going to be able to watch it pass you by. So you just gotta sit back and relax and see where it goes, and hope you got the best equipment, because a lot of the times we don't have the right equipment, or it fails, or the battery dies. Oh my gosh. Every time we turn around, something's going wrong with the equipment, and we're trying to figure out better ways to do that.
Yeah, and I imagine that with those sometimes feels like failures, you probably learn more than you would if you had something go smoothly or seamlessly. Have you noticed that?
Oh, we've accidentally stumbled across some things, and I'm like, wow, where did that come from? And we've been able to replicate it, which is even better, because that means it wasn't an accident, or it was an accident stumbling into it, but then we're like able to replicate it, and that blew my mind. And it's happened a few times on a few different things, and so I'm excited to go down those paths to figure out what that actually means. And so, yeah, I'm very excited for that one.
That's awesome. And some people would say that that wasn't an accident, that those things happen that way. And it's interesting to get different perspectives just on how things flow and how things work. And those accidental things, one of the things that Crystal and I have talked about is that the day that you and Crystal had talked about doing the podcast, I called Crystal because she and I had been talking about doing a podcast for years, and it never came to fruition. But that morning I called her and I said, hey, when are we going to do that podcast?
Not only that, that morning I'd said to myself, I've got to text Andrea today, and not about a podcast or anything, but I just had this like, talk to Andrea in a while. I got to shoot her a text. And so we both on the same day had this feeling, if you will, that we needed to talk to each other. So
Yeah. And to me, that just speaks to this is, as you say, the pathway that I'm meant to be on at this time. And that's what makes it super exciting. And honestly, it's vulnerable to me to talk about some of the things that I feel are mystic and some of the things that I believe in and have experienced, because there can be a feeling that somebody might think it's just too weird, that maybe I'm faking it or something like that. And I think that's one of the things that we really want to bring forward in the podcast as co-hosts, is that we are in no way looking to embarrass anyone. We're not going to ever discount anyone. And we're going to always make sure that it's a safe environment for the people we're speaking to, and also the people that are listening. To our listeners, we respect them greatly. We also would love to hear their stories. And Crystal, you said something about gotcha. Would you explain that again? Because we want to really make it clear that we do not do a gotcha program.
I mean, you've really mostly said it, but we do definitely want to make it very clear that we're not here to expose anybody. We're not here to turn any tables. We're not, we want to hear stories. We won't broadcast anything that we think may cause harm. But we also do a vetting process before we get our podcast guests. And, we're really in this with the best of intentions and with a spirit of friendship, I would say.
That's awesome. And what's your take on that, Topher, and our environment?
So, and that's the big one, because a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people, and when I first started this, they were like, "Oh, put me on there, because I talk to ghosts." And I'm like, in the back of my head,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Well, what if you're schizophrenic?" I wouldn't want to put you on there if that's the case. But then I'm like, "Well, what if you're really talking to ghosts and the psychologist is thinking you're schizophrenic, because somebody accidentally, or somebody talked to me about it and said, well, this is what you're looking for if they're schizophrenic." And I'm like, well, that sounds just like you're talking to a ghost. Like, why do you discount something you don't believe just because you don't understand it? And so that's why we're looking for other things to help understand what's going on, and that's the hardest part when you're doing a ghost hunt. I hate to use the term ghost hunt because we're not really hunting them, but ghost observation. When you're out doing that type of stuff, and you're like, oh, this person's calm and he's walking down the stairs or something like that. And we're like, well, how do we find the history of this place? And that's tough to do on a lot of the places because I mean, there's no traumatic things going on. So why would this person be schizophrenic? And when it could just be a ghost or an echo, it could just be an echo. We don't even know that. And that's another theory I'm really excited to check on and see if it's just an echo in time.
Wow, and that just brings up so many possibilities on direction to go with that. I'm excited to look towards those sorts of adventures too. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So the team that is involved are studying different aspects of mystic experiences and stuff. Do you have any focus on how you look into mystic activities, or how do you approach a mystic experience and investigation, if you will?
So we got lucky. We have a really, really amazing team right now. We have Mindy, Aaron, Justin, Nate, and Kenneth, and myself.
And these
We
two
have
chopped potatoes.
Yeah, but we've got mystic people on our team because I don't understand the mystical world. And so for us to research it, we need someone who kind of understands the mystical world to explain it to us too. So we know what type of equipment we need to bring. And so we do have some mystical people that are like, oh, this is, we're going to study this, and this is the experiences that we're going to be looking for. And then also they can talk about how they experienced it, which is going to be different than the way I experienced it, and how they perceived it, which is going to be different than the way I perceived it. And then Kenneth, he's going to be doing a lot of the equipment, and the way that he perceives it's going to be completely different than the way I do it, because he's going to be looking through the lens of a thermal camera or something. And so we got a lot of different unique ways to look at the same thing to see if we can get a broader picture of what's going on.
How is this different than like your standard ghost hunter situation? And again, I agree with you on the ghost hunter, but that's kind of the parlance of our times. How do you feel, how do you feel like this is different from that?
So I used to do the adventures where they'd go out to the haunted places, and people would be walking around with these spirit boxes and talking and tripping over everything. But they saw everything as from my perspective, this is just my perspective, they saw everything as a surface issue. Like, oh, if this person isn't, or like with a spirit box, hey, do you hear me, or did knock 3 times, or talk to me, or something like that. And if they did it right on the surface, and that's what's going on. And it's like, well, how did that happen? Like, when you hear a voice on a recorder, how come you can hear a voice on a recorder versus you not be able to hear it through your hearing? That's what we're looking for. We've found frequencies that we've been able to manipulate now, which this is like preliminary. We finally started to find these frequencies that we're starting to manipulate that's actually able to affect electrical appliances and or flashlights or whatever. The spirits could talk to you. My perspective, I watched somebody walk around with a spirit box for 2 hours talking through a spirit box, and that's all it was. They didn't see the how did that happen versus let's have a conversation.
Wow. And so with some of the devices you use, you've talked about having the right equipment. What kind of things does that look like for you when you do these videos and these sorts of experiences?
Well, we have the thermal camera because you can tell the different temperatures in the room and between your host or whatever. We're hoping we can start seeing energy transfers and stuff like that. We haven't seen anything like that yet, but we're relatively new. We have a brain sensor that actually senses the frequencies in the brain, the intensity of the frequencies of the brain, not mapping out the brain because that's in a lab when we can't get a lab to a haunted place. But we've been able to find certain frequencies that way. We do have a frequency thing that checks all frequencies going on around us. We have the recorders, we have the generic spirit box and everything like that. But then we're trying to look at other things. And so anytime somebody says, oh, hey, you need this equipment. All right, oh, let's bring it on. Let's figure out what this equipment does, and then let's integrate it in, because that broadens our view of it. Every episode, we're learning something new and going, oh, let's add that to our next episode so we can broaden our range.
Topher, will you explain what an episode is? Because I know you're not talking about the podcast.
Oh yeah, we're also filming with our cameras in front of it, and then we're posting those. So we got the podcast, and then we also have the in front of the camera episodes. And those ones, we're not trying to do the let's explain everything in one episode type of a thing. It's going to be an ongoing. Every episode's going to build on each other, because as we learn something new, we're going to build onto it. Because if we all knew it all at once, then we'd already know it all.
Right.
Well, I also like that in the formats that we've set up, that we have both the audible interviews with the people that you will be doing the video interviews with as well, and vice versa, and coming back and following up. And it's an exciting time to be able to delve deeper, because as you said, if we tried to jam it all into one episode of any kind, it would be impossible. And also it would be very difficult to really relate one experience to another.
Plus, if you filmed it all even within a year, you're still going to miss something. We meet a new mystical person, and they have a different perspective. And, oh, hey, 5 episodes ago, we're like, oh, geez, we could have used that back then. We're not going to re-edit it and add you into it. We're just going to add to the story and build onto it.
Well, and I look forward to the potential too to follow some of these mystics and see how they develop over time, maybe bringing more skills, because one of the things is asking what are they doing to learn and to improve their skills and things like that, and just follow it and see how it goes, and maybe see that more of them may interact and intersect than we initially thought.
Well, one person did tell me once that everybody's a mystic, or everybody's a psychic. Let me rephrase that. Everybody's a psychic. And I think I would like to test that theory. Like, let's get a regular person, and we'll put the brain scanner on them. We'll do all this stuff and confirm that they're the average person.
They're normie.
And then, yeah, whatever. And then let's start teaching them. Let's start giving them the whatever they use to better themselves. So let's see if we can actually build and watch that growth. I think that would be a really fun adventure to watch.
Me too. And one of the things that we've spoken with people about is how at different times they've embraced their gifts in different ways, because many times, like you said, people will notice they have a talent, skill, gift when they're young, but for one reason or another, it stopped. Whether it was a conscious choice of their own or their environment didn't allow it or something like that. So with these latent gifts, as they open up to them, it's been really interesting to hear people's stories about how their gifts have progressed and they continue to progress as they move along.
So Topher, what would you say is your favorite mystical thing to explore?
That's a tough one, because everything's uniquely awesome in its own right. But I love fire. I'm a fire lover since I was a little kid. You see me in the backyard lighting off fireworks, almost blowing myself up. I got grounded when I was like 6 for playing with gasoline in the garage.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm a fire performer. I've been to a lot of festivals. I breathe fire. Walking on fire was pretty cool to watch. I love fire. That's my favorite. But there's so much more to the world than just fire.
I absolutely agree, because I am afraid of fire. One time my son attempted to set the truck of a friend of mine on fire because he and his friend were doing a science experiment, and they had taken a 5-gallon bottle of gas and poured it to burn whatever they were doing. And they had neglected to mention to me they were using fire, but they were doing this. And then the other boy had taken the can and was walking away and had dribbled gas all along the driveway. So they set their little fire on fire, and then whoosh, and I was in the house with my friend, and he's like, that looks like flames. And he was a firefighter, so he knew what flames looked like. He went running out, and the fire was approaching his truck, and he was not thrilled. And the can was underneath the truck. And so he had to lift it up. It had started to burn. He had lifted up with a shovel that, because he's a firefighter, had in his back of his truck. and chucked it and then covered it with dirt and stuff. And I'm like, wow. Anyway, so my son did get grounded then too. He was a lot older and should have known better though. He was 13 or 14.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was exciting.
That sounds like it could be Ron Hatfield influence.
Could be. Don't know if Ron was related to that experience or not, but it was definitely startling for me. And my friend moved the truck. So
Yeah, I've
Wild.
watched it. There's actually some experiences at a festival that I do of people dumping gasoline on, and then the vapors from it and then that lights up, and people will drop the gas bottle, and then they'll shoot gasoline at people.
Oh,
A
jeez.
lot of people get hurt.
Yeah.
Fire is not something to play with. You gotta
Mm-mm.
respect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, unrelated to my name, crystals are my favorite. My favorite. I love crystals.
Yeah.
Probably as much as you like fire.
I agree. And for me, crystals and other types of sound devices, I use drums and bells and rattles and a lot of other different types of things that assist me in doing the various types of skills and gifts and things that I have. And so I use them together, and just that music aspect is big for me. But what's interesting to me is that I don't really care that much about other type of music. I mean, I listen to music, but I don't really care about it. But the things that come from drums, the things that mirror to me our body and our heartbeat and things like that are huge to me, because it's part of the healing of the whole. So
Mhm.
those working together, the crystals and sounds and the frequencies and things that we will be talking about are huge to me. So with this, as we were speaking before, bringing these mystic things to the fore can feel vulnerable for those of us who are doing it. What made you decide to found this Mystic Detectives, and then a byproduct for the podcast? What made you bring that forward?
You know, like you were saying, the universe has pushed, and I'm like, okay, we'll do this, because I didn't expect this to happen. I got into filming stuff, and that was pretty cool. We were gonna film something on just something simple on just recording the recordings that we couldn't hear, and then somebody else tripped and brought in all these mystical people. I'm like, oh wow, we got all these spirit mediums, and like let's do something fun with them. And so we put the brain scanner on them and like send them to haunted places, and then that turned into something. And then I'm like, what else is going on out there? And then just people have been coming. I've been letting this grow on its own. This is how it's become. I've not pushed it at all. I've let it manifest and let the universe bring it together.
Okay, I'm going to qualify this. I was surprised, ultimately not surprised, because Topher is a man of the people, but I was really surprised when our podcast slots started filling up so quickly. We're brand new, and we don't know any of these people from a can of soup, as an old friend of mine used to say. And it really has just kind of come to us. Like, we haven't really done any advertising or heavy-handed asking for guests. We've just kind of had them come to us and want to be heard, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And, some of them, well, we don't know most of them. Some of them we do know. And what's been interesting to me is how much I've learned in talking with people, getting ready for the podcast and things like that. And while this is our introduction, we do have a few podcasts that we have in the can, as they say. And so we've got some interviews coming up that we're really excited to bring forward. And to find that so many people have the common thread, everything from, as you said, Topher, having experiences as small children, to how they have either brought forward their gifts or pushed them aside. And the things I've noticed about people who've pushed it aside, it's because there was some level of fear related. And once they were able to clear that fear, they were able to embrace it again. And what I've seen in my life generally, and this specifically, is that fear can really block those gifts. It can really take people out of their heart, which I think these gifts are not a brain thing. It's not I mean, it's not a rational, logical thinking thing. And I feel like if people try to track it that way, it can really be challenging. Although I do believe that they're measurable things, like what you're talking about, Topher, is that while it is a level of heart and spirit, some of it can be measured because we also all have bodies here on this earth right now. And that's the thing that really brings it all together to me and makes it fascinating to have both the podcast and the video episodes that are going to be coming out, so that we can link those things together and be able to see how we really do interact with our mind, body, and spirit.
I am really excited to see where this goes too, because even now it's growing. People have been reaching out to me and they're like, "Oh, let's do this," and that's so. But we're gonna slowly let it grow. We just don't want to rush it into anything and see where it goes. We definitely want to invite any listeners that have opinions or anything. Just reach out. Become part of a voice. We're the Mystic Detectives. We're not here. It's not just us. It's our audience too. We're all here.
Where would they reach out, Toph?
Our website, mysticdetectives.com.
Awesome. We're also on Facebook, Mystic Detectives. And so they can look there too, and has our contact information on both sites, right?
Yeah, and it's not my jam, but I know Kenneth's setting up a place where people can have conversations. And you can go to our website or our Facebook and start a thread there. And let's start a conversation. Let's really dig into every episode and say, hey, I retried it and it didn't work for me. So, or I did it at my house and it worked for me. So let's have this conversation. Let's really figure out what's going on. And this is a platform for everybody to have a conversation.
Yeah, and I really look at that as a possibility for learning too, because, while I feel strong in some of the things that I do, there's a lot of things I don't know anything about. I'll talk about energy work and people say, well, do you do this? Do you do that? I'm like, no, I don't have all the tools, and nor do I want them all, really, because I don't have time in a day. But it's interesting to learn different people's perspectives and things like that. And I feel like we can have some amazing, really respectful conversations. And as you said, keeping it safe. Because that's so huge. When people are sharing these sorts of things, they're sharing their spirit, and that's really exciting to see. And it'll be interesting to see where people might have gotten training or things like that too.
One of my favorite things recently that I've noticed was I live in Utah, and our governor reached out last year because we were in the worst drought ever. We really needed water. And he was like, everybody, all pray. We need water. 9 months later, we had the most water we've ever had. We've reached record snow packs. And I'm like, wow, something really happened. So I'm like, even the mystical world isn't just to the witches and the shamans and stuff. I mean, even the religious people, the Mormons, all of them, they're also part of the mystical world. And people need to realize that too. We're not here to suppress anybody. We're just here to go, hey, let's see what common grounds we can start from, and let's build a life together.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I agree. And I was actually going to say a similar thing. So I'm glad you said it, Topher, because we do want to make it clear that if your beliefs in the mystical are religious, based on a God, we're not going to judge that at all. If they aren't, we're not going to judge that at all. If you think it comes from a broomstick, we're not going to judge that. Like, we really, really are really just here to hear stories, to learn, and be better for it.
Well, and I feel like too that as we're talking with people and each other even, that I personally am seeing more connection than disconnection than I really realized was there. So like you said, both of you have said, bringing that commonality in there, even if we look at it from a slightly different perspective or lens, to know that we all share something. And I really do believe that we all share something. We just call it different stuff.
I agree with that 100%.
Yep, I do too. So Topher, I know we haven't been doing this very long. You've been doing some form of this for a little bit longer than we've actually had the formal Mystic Detectives group. Has your perspective of the mystical world changed at all with the experiences you've had?
So when I was younger, when I was a teenager specifically, I saw things that I didn't understand, and then I started. I was like, wow, that's so fascinating, and then I totally believed it to bottom of my heart. Everything, anything anybody said, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then when I hit my 20s, I started to find out people were lying to me, and then that made me go, oh, that's annoying. And so I started questioning everything, and really disheartening. And then getting into this, I'm starting to find that sense of wow again, because even though I was lied to, it doesn't mean everybody's lying. And I needed to get back to the goal. Holy cow, I really want to know what's going on there.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes it's challenging to understand who is really authentic. And I feel like some people may not directly lie. I mean, some people do, but I feel like some people may just not be authentic completely. And one of the things is figuring out, at least for me, to be able to identify that. How do we know? I mean, how do we look at it? And one of these things that you do, Toph, is do the measurements, because that can give us some indication of where a person is physiologically, where their body is, where their heart rate's going, where things like that, which can be indicators of being inauthentic or lying or something. And so it's kind of interesting. And so it's what I find is when I listen to people's stories that some people have heard things that they felt was a lie, and sometimes it legitimately was plain old lying, but other times it may be a different perspective. And so that's what I'm also excited about too, is listening to people's stories and their experiences and find out how their perspective was different from mine. And I think we all know that there can be 7 people in a room and the exact same thing happens and we all experience something different. And a lot of us, based on our history, our perspective, our angle to the situation, even a literal physical angle of how we see things. And so that's exciting to me too, that with the experiences in your episodes on the video, that you come at it from a perspective of all kinds of different experiences, different people, and different measurement devices. So I'm really excited and looking forward to how that unfolds.
And I'm really excited for the podcast section, because that really gets into depth of how they became a mystic, or their story. And for me to in my 20s, I was like, oh, they were lying to me, because I didn't get to hear their story. I only got to see the surface part. But you guys are going to tell me their story, which fascinates me, because we can't do that with a video. We can go a little bit into, but we can't really tell the story as much as we want. But you guys' podcast is going to be great. I'm really excited to hear the podcast, to hear how these people became who they are and all the fears that they went through.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, even just some of the preliminary conversations we've had with people as well about how they've gotten from point A to point B to whatever point they're at now.
Yeah.
What do you say, Crystal?
I agree. I'm excited to bring their stories to an audience. And I just, I cannot tell you how excited I am to do this podcast. I have plenty of other stuff going on in my life. I don't need to add another thing to it. But when Topher asked me if I would do the podcast, I didn't even hesitate for a second. This is something that I feel such a pull towards, that I'll give up some video game playing time or whatever to be able to do this, because it feels that I don't want to say important, because I don't think that's the right word, but it feels that right, I guess.
Well, and I look at it too as important. I feel like important is a good word for it, because of that connection that we are developing and seeing. And I feel like if through our podcast and through our videos, through the Mystic Detectives groups, we can bring some light to the world, which sounds very lofty, but I really believe that we have an opportunity by showing, and Topher, you alluded to this earlier, that we have more commonalities than we have things that are dissimilar. And I think that in our world now, we really need to be able to see those commonalities, because it's the division that is causing our problems. And through this, and again, sounding super lofty, but I believe it, that as we start to share these stories and start to open people's minds to possibilities, I feel like it can make a big shift.
Well, and also there's kind of a shroud of darkness over mysticism in general, really, with, I think, the exception of when it's tied to religion. It's considered dark and, bad and whatever. And for a lot of people, I don't want to say, obviously that's not globally universal, and so I think that we can also bring the light just to the realities of it, right? That again, I mean, it really all ties back. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to contribute without actually contributing, but it really does draw all the way. It draws back to that commonality.
I think that we're all on the same track, just using different words to get there. And which is probably some of the things we're going to find in investigation, that as we look at people, even looking, as I say, in different disciplines and things like that, some of the people that we've interviewed for the podcast so far, the very exciting podcasts that are coming, had some common training or common links, one of them being Reiki, having become Reiki masters, which, Crystal and I are as well. And so have that common basis, and then to move forward from there is interesting to me. So I would like to, during our podcast, delve a little bit more into how that link brought them to the next step, whatever it is, because some of them have diverged in other directions. And so it's just interesting to see how that one step will have brought someone forward one way or another. And I think that we'll find the more people that we interview and talk with in video, the more we're going to find that link that started the process.
I'm really excited to, the more people we learn about, how they perceive everything, the feelings that they get doing that type of stuff, how even the organized religions, how they take those emotions and they tied a whole ideology to it. And I'm like, well, now everybody's got that same emotion, but what triggers them differently? Or the trigger's the same, but how they perceive it's differently. And I think it's going to be really cool for people to see that we all are the same people. We just perceive it differently, or the outcome is what we perceive differently.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
And maybe the source.
So what we call it, where it comes from. Is that what you mean by source?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
We all want a glass of water. Where we get it's totally different.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly. And that's so true. And again, it's just so fun to kind of look down the road and see where I think we might be heading, and see where we go. And I can pretty much assure myself and y'all that it's going to be so different. And so that's super exciting to me. So Topher, one of the things I was wondering too is, as you've done these videos and you've done these experiments and things like that, you talked about fire being your passion. Have you found anything else that you might be looking to delve into more personally, like any kind of training classes, any kind of gifts you might feel like you might be uncovering?
For me, I know my gifts. And sooner or later I might start to share them, but I'm still pretty hesitant on opening myself up to the world. But I definitely like to tell everybody else's stories. But like I said, I'm excited to see if people are able to learn that don't know, and watch that progression and see where they go. And then using our techniques, like I want to start developing techniques of going, hey, we've been able to measure this and we've been able to do this to help you enhance that. Maybe we can enhance it and continuously build on something. And we've been working with a lot of mystical people that are like, oh, this helped this. And I'm like, oh, let's implement that and see if we can measure it and grow on that. And then maybe soon I will let you guys know my side and why I do my fire. But that's my personal path right now that I'm not willing to share with anybody yet.
And there's that
Mhm.
vulnerability again, that it takes a lot of vulnerability to come out with, these gifts and to share them with the world, because there is a lot of darkness and fear around them. And when I first started my store, my cute little metaphysical shop, I felt the imposter syndrome big time. And then when I started doing Reiki, imposter syndrome big time. And it took a really long time for that imposter syndrome, that feeling of I'm lying to myself and everybody else, to go away. And I don't say that like, I want to make it clear that I didn't convince myself out of it. I just allowed myself to let my gifts be what they are and to share them. And so I get it. So I totally get it. And everyone gets to have their own timeline when it comes to sharing gifts.
Yeah, and I think everyone's journey is different. And I came out of it. It's sort of funny because, I mean, both know me pretty well, and I have been told that sometimes I'm too serious and sometimes too professional or businesslike, and that's just how I was raised. But what's really interesting to me is when I tell people that, I've got these gifts, these spiritual insights and things like that, they always say, well, I mean, we knew that.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting to me is when, especially with this podcast coming out, and I said, well, guess what? Everybody said some level of, well, it's about time, or we knew you would start talking about this more, or something like this. And it was interesting to me how I thought that this had been sort of a hidden gift and everybody already knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was pretty funny, especially listening to what you guys are saying, is that I think that people who know. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? And
Mm-hmm.
even people who don't, they know there's something different.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've noticed is as I lean in, people are more and more drawn to me and more open and do things that surprise me when I know that it's just being in that space or that alignment.
I have a sister that says everybody loves Crystal. Nobody can dislike Crystal. And I always feel silly, like blushing, right? But I think it's the same thing. I think it's because I've let myself be myself, and take all of the judgment away, let other people be themselves. Like a good comparison, I think. So I used to be a really picky eater. And as I got poorer, frankly, when I was younger and had young children, I'd try something and I would be like, this is disgusting. Hummus is a great example. So my ex-husband made hummus one day and I was like, I am not eating that drywall paste. Gross. And I tried it and I was like, yep, drywall paste. Anyway, what I learned to do and what I've tried to teach my kids is to let the food taste like what it is. So don't look at hummus and say, I expect that hummus to taste like creamy dill dip, right? And then when it doesn't taste like that, be disappointed in the hummus. And that has made a huge difference in my palate and, in my life in general. And now I enjoy so many more foods. And I feel like it's the same way. It's the same way with people, man. Let people be who they are. If they don't fit with you, let them move on.
Yeah, I just saw a quote that Topher mentioned recently about that. What was that quote, Toph? Do you remember it? The gist of it was that, to what I got out of the gist of it is that some people come to our lives for a reason, a season, things like that. But if they don't fit or they don't work, like you're talking about, Crystal, we get to let them go and essentially learn the lesson, which I have not always been the greatest at learning the lessons that people are happy to teach me, but that's the important thing, and that's what I got out of that message you sent. But I didn't memorize it quickly enough, but that's what I got. And also the whole don't judge the book by its cover, because there's so many people that historically, for myself, I might have judged based on appearance or activities or things like that. And where I've learned that while sometimes appearance can be telling a story, well, it always tells a story, I suppose, but it isn't always the story to me,
Right.
my reality of the story isn't their reality of the story.
Right.
People that comes to mind is that new country, not new country singer, but the country singer that has the tattoos all over his face. He's not the typical singer of any kind, except for potentially the rap and things like that. And when he first tried to move into a wider market, people weren't accepting him because he had tattoos. He's a very big man, things like that. But when people started looking past his physical appearance to his actual skill or sound, it was a whole different thing. And so to me, that is one of the things, and he is one of the people that can bridge the gap of like we were talking about, the connection where we may have more in common than we ever realized.
When you see the world prejudges all the time.
Mhm.
Everybody hates because there's a line, an imaginary line crossing one border to the next.
Yep.
I mean, there's really no line except for we put it there.
Mhm.
And people judge on that. That's
Mhm.
annoying. I didn't realize that until a long time ago, but
Yeah.
that's a whole other.
Another podcast.
Well, that can't become a podcast because it's with somebody that I care very much deeply, and they're in a part of a world. If they found out, they wouldn't be around anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And there's just so much of that comes out. So, I mean, for me to kind of tie up some of the things that we've said is just that we're open to hear the experiences. We'd love to hear from people about what they do, what their gifts are, their talents are, what they might want us to look into, and to provide that sort of a platform and open discussion. And that's how I see part of our path.
And I would like to, I would like every 10th episode or something, maybe however randomly just pop up and have a podcast and shoot the breeze and
Cool.
talk about what we've learned and
Yeah,
all
I like
the
it.
people we've talked.
Yeah.
And then we'll bring in some of our other guests and have a little groups, and you guys check in on us from time to time while we're driving down to wherever we're going. I just got an RV. We're gonna call it the Mystic Mobile.
There you
Yeah.
go. That's awesome. Well, I think by giving that, thanks for your time. Thanks for putting this all together, being the founder for this great adventure for us. And wherever it takes us, I'm just glad to be part of it. And I look forward to all the other people that we become involved with. And I invite you to stay curious
And keep exploring.